Thank you all so much for coming today. Let me just give some context to at least why we asked these folks to come and talk with us. The Alan Alt Award is an online course excellence award and acknowledges the strong partnerships between instructional designer and faculty of record. And so every time I attend something like this, I always learn something. I've been doing course development and helping people with computers and web stuff a long time, and I always learn something. And so Dr. Kelly Ward's former faculty member with the Department of Social Work. Mary Henson's a senior instructional designer in EKU Online, and she tells me her most successful recent design has been an eggless oatmeal cookie. And I'm giving serious thought to making you prove that, Mary, in a real way. So with that, take it away, and thank you all for coming today.
Thanks. So Mary and I have talked about how we're going to do this. And so we want you to ask questions as you have them. And what's going to happen is that I'm going to talk about the slide and Mary's going to ask questions about it afterwards, but feel free to jump in at any point. So when I started in social work, the first class I needed to design was this course, Social Work 810 Human Behavior, Part 1. And I knew what the content was going to be, but I wasn't sure the best way to engage the students in the material. And so Mary and I talked about the community of inquiry, trying to get a social presence, a cognitive presence, and a teaching presence that gave the students the best experience possible. So this was a new program, the MSW program online. And although there was a similar class at the undergraduate level, our goal was to create something that was separate and different from that. And you should know that there was also an EOR, open access education book that we used too. So the students didn't have to buy a textbook for this, which I think helped them as well. So our goal was to create something that gave us all of this information that would engage them.
And I'm so glad we're going to have a chance to look at Kelly's course and to look at the ways that she brings all these elements together in activities and assessments and also in materials.
I love the way Mary always calls it our course, because this is half Mary's course, because she is a truly remarkable human being and she's got tons of ideas. So I was the subject matter expert. I knew the syllabus that I wanted to develop. I knew the content I wanted to teach. I wanted to make sure that the students had what they needed to start their internships in social work. And so I had the content. I just didn't know the best way to give it to them. I also had videos that I came with to Eastern Kentucky that I had developed at other universities that I was allowed to use, that Mary edited and add little captions like I was on a news show. And so it looked very professional and very strong. And they were little teeny tiny snippets. So some of them were 5 minutes, some of them were 10 minutes, but it just gave introduction to the students about what they were going to see in PowerPoints that we also turned into videos for the students. And Mary's job was to work with me and look at the tools that I wanted to use and kind of help me build what we were talking about.
And something I really have always loved about collaborating with Kelly is that she knows so clearly what she wants students to know and be able to do at the end of the class, and is so in tune with what it is to be a student at a different level of understanding the content than she has, because that's also very important as we think about what tools to build and what topics. And the mini lectures that Kelly has in the class really help to we group them thematically, and we'll show you some examples of how that was done.
So I started from the bottom and worked up. So I knew what the content was going to be, and I knew kind of what assignments would get me there. And then there's an extra layer of issues for social work in that we are accredited at the national level with Council on Social Work Education. So we do competency-based education in social work. So I had to link everything I thought the students needed to know with a competency as well as with an assignment. And so reaching the goal, there's things that I think the students need to know that are not covered in the competencies. So it's incorporating that material in as well as what the competencies are required, and working backwards to get to the front end. And Mary gave me this course outline to follow, what the modules were going to be in. It's it's an online program, so it's 8-week modules. I had to create objectives, which we use through Quality Matters objectives, what the learning materials were going to be, what the activities were, and what the assessments were. I didn't necessarily want an assessment in every module because I didn't want the students to be overwhelmed, but I did want to make sure there was something to capture each of the objectives because Quality Matters requires that. So that's what we worked on. And so this was the chart that I built as I was working from the syllabus and the readings.
And the QM criteria, we have a template that social work uses that is really answers a lot of the baseline criteria, but an essential part of the QM is really up to each course, and it has to do with alignment. And so this is what we mean when we talk about alignment, and this is one thing I think Kelly's course was really focused on.
So you can see clearly we need to worry about objectives, what materials we're going to have, and what's the assessment. Sometimes the assessment was just a quick learning quiz, like 3 questions to make sure we saw that the students read the materials or viewed the videos that we had. And it was able to help us move forward with the students not feeling like they were overwhelmed with tons of work. It's a lot of work to be in an 8-week course in graduate school. So they did feel overwhelmed, but some of the little quizzes made it a lot easier. So we're not going to see this video. I liked my hair back then. I didn't like my weight as much. So take it for what it's worth. But this video was talking about empathy, and empathy is an essential thing for students in social work to have, both with their clients and with the amount of work they have to do. So they have to balance their lives pretty succinctly because they've got internship classes, and almost all of them are adult learners that came back to school later in life. Kids running around, baseball games to go to, soccer games to get to. So these help the students be able to listen to them on the way to some of these activities with their students, with their family members, in the car, in between work assignments. So that helped them a lot to have the videos.
So we were able to add text on screen and sometimes maybe a illustration to show something that was described, such as when you talk about ecomaps or genograms, we were able to have some examples of those types of tools in the videos as well. And the timing is important because Kelly wasn't creating 30-minute lectures for students to watch, but rather very specific mini lectures on topic specific to each module.
So we also did so I did all my PowerPoints and then I turned them into streams. That was really easy. What I didn't know when I did the PowerPoints is that I kept talking, and sometimes when I converted it into a stream, it cut me off. Or I got to the end of the last slide and I didn't realize it was the end of the slide. And so there's some videos that I've left at Eastern Kentucky that probably need a little bit of editing and snipping, but the students were allowed to choose a PowerPoint, a Microsoft Stream, and get the transcript for each and every lecture. Some students preferred the PowerPoints and they wanted to download them. That wasn't the plan in the class at first. The plan was just to put the Microsoft Streams up, but students liked having the PowerPoints to listen to or to look at afterwards. So I'm sure there's a lot of students that have all these saved for them for each class they've taken so far. And so it was good. We had to go back in and put the PowerPoints back in along with the streams. But this gave the students the opportunities. And of course, when we did the PowerPoints, everything was copyright and everything was protected for students with disabilities. So we did an accessibility checker. And so it was fun putting the videos together. Stephanie, you got an idea. So Mary can answer the question about the difference between the two. Microsoft Stream is just available to us free, and you save it as a video instead of save it as PowerPoint. Go ahead, Mary.
And the other thing about Stream is, you know, versus YouTube, YouTube is available to a wider audience, but Stream is only available to EKU users.
But what about Screencast-O-Matic, which is what Stephanie's wondering about?
Yeah, so it's also a good screencasting, but I don't think that the captions are quite as accurate as they are in Stream. I haven't checked it recently, but it is definitely something to check, because as you can see, the thing about the auto captions in the Stream is that they even have, hi everybody, there's a period, there's a capital letter at the start of, like all the other PowerPoints in this class were jam-packed with information. They even put after adulthood a comma. So that type of accurate captioning and grammar is something that isn't part of YouTube. And so you could load up a screencast even to Stream, or you could load it up to YouTube and just correct your captions. And that's something that we do sometimes, is just go in and correct the captions. And with a short video, or when you have the script, it's fairly easy to do. But that's a great question. And any kind of screencast will do the job in this way. So I think that's also good to ask.
So Stephanie, the Stream is just another Microsoft tool. So it's already on your screen, on your computer, and you probably didn't even know you had it. And all my class left was on OneDrive. So everything linked from OneDrive onto Blackboard. So I never had a YouTube channel.
But it is true, Stephanie, and you pointed out that people at EKU do have the option of using YouTube with their EKU account as well. So either option works. This is the login to Stream. I'm just going to drag it onto the screen, and you can see that you would sign in then to your account, and then you could access your streams. So here it is. Let's find one. Here it is. And that's how you could access. Here's one for Dr. Callahan. I think she may be joining us at some point, but you can see that the stream is active there, and it similar to your Office 365. You're going to see it, the checkerboard here, and Stream is an option. So I will scoot that out of the way. Stephanie, does that answer your question?
Okay, I think we could go to the next screen,
Okay.
I think.
Perfect. Sorry, let's see. There we go. Thanks.
So this just is more about what we talked about. So every one of my PowerPoints was audio. It was narrated, so the students could go through it without the narration. They could go through it with the narration. I think obviously the students could go through it faster without the narration, but if they didn't read, there wasn't enough on the screen to give them the content. And that was done purposely so they could go back and look at the information, because the class is so fast that the PowerPoints would be so long if I put all the content from every chapter in a PowerPoint. And so the narration kind of gave them a summary of what I wanted them to learn from the individual chapter, but you couldn't find that information on the screen. And I tried to make it lively enough by having enough pictures and enough color that it made things better for people.
So Kelly, what I'm wondering about is you took the faculty PD course before teaching this class. Did that influence any of your choices with what you wanted to put in the course?
That was the class that was so fast moving in the summer that traumatized me, that class. Yes, I learned a lot in that class, and there were things that I didn't know existed as tools and opportunities. I didn't master well Flipgrid, but there was so many other tools that I found were capable both in Blackboard and in presenting that really helped me make decisions about being creative about how I presented the material. So I developed 4 courses while I was at Eastern Kentucky, and Mary and I put a crossword puzzle in one and a matching game in another. And I learned all of those things in the PD class. And had I stayed, I would have taken the advanced one. There was a lot of information. It moved very fast, which is why I said I was traumatized. I was like, oh my God, I have so much to do. And I did it before I started, which was very good idea, trying to manage being a student in that class while teaching my first semester would have been a challenge for sure. But there was a lot of good information in it. And for anybody who's in the room that hasn't taken it yet, even though I kid about how fast paced it was really a good experience, and you should take it if you can. We weren't quite done yet. There we go.
Not quite done yet.
So I did give students, it's a completely online program. So I gave them options to meet at the end of the first week so they could get to know each other and get to know who I was. We reviewed the syllabi. I showed them where they could find resources on Blackboard that was going to help them navigate Blackboard, get to the library, understand what the assignments in the library were. Brad put together in this course a way for the students to work through their assignments, so they had access to ideas about how to go to the library to complete the assignment for this course. They knew I had office hours and could find me. I had phone meetings at all kinds of variety of times. Students were there in their internships, taking a break in the evening, on the weekends, just what works with the student's schedule. Being available gave them the idea that I would be accessible to them, which I think eased them. I also posted 3 notes a week, one on Monday to say what they were doing, one on Wednesday to remind them to do what they're doing, and one on Sunday saying, last chance, everything's got to be in by tonight. So they had access to me. And then the students created their own chat group that helped them most of the time. One time they all went off on a tangent and they got the assignment wrong because they all agreed that this was the way they should do it. And I let them redo it and explain to them that it would have been nice if somebody had double checked with me before they jumped up on their decision. But for the most part, they were supportive with each other, could give people their suggestions to each other on what to look for to study or to put their papers together. So it created the first class during the first week, gave them the ability to start grouping together in their own text group.
And in eCampus classes, we don't require any meetings, but it's okay for an instructor to offer a virtual meeting as long as there's a video or some alternative activity required. And so I think this is a great way to reach out to students while still offering the option for someone who doesn't have any kind of compatible schedule.
Right. I recorded all the, so I recorded the first meeting and I would post it on as an announcement in Blackboard. But if a student asked me a question, I just assumed that everybody else in the class probably had the question. So then I would post that as an announcement too. Someone has just asked me this about this assignment. So my announcement page was really long because there was a lot of different announcements. Professor Callahan has got pictures and colors and fonts in all kinds of different ways that make her announcements really engaging. I was not that engaging, but I had a lot of announcements and communication with them. So then there was student-to-student discussions. I rarely interfered in the discussion questions because I wanted them to have their own carry-on. So they had to post an initial discussion question almost every week, and then they had to reply to 2 of their peers by the end of the week. And so this is an example of one of the questions that the students would get. And I only stepped in if they were really off base or they needed something else to think about. I just felt like this was their place to build their rapport in their cohort. This was one of the first classes the students took during their first semester. And I wanted them to have connections with each other moving forward. So if you looked in the discussions, I graded them. I gave them feedback on their individual comments, but I didn't engage normally. The only difference was I engaged with the students on a question that they were very strong on a personal level on the answer. So I don't know how many of you know, but Georgetown University students voted to increase their tuition by 75 cents a credit hour so that they could do some kind of return back to the African-American slaves that built their university. And so I asked the students what they thought about that, and all they could think about was their own student loans, and that would be unfair and unreasonable, and it would be a burden. I said, I'm not trying to encourage that Eastern Kentucky does this. I'm just asking your opinion about whether or not this is a good idea in some way to do reparations for people. And the students were not real happy with me because they didn't like my take on the idea, because they overwhelmingly said it was not a good idea to do any kind of reparations that would impact them individually. So that was the only time I jumped in on a discussion. But other than that, the discussions were well attended and the students supported each other and gave good replies to each other.
And I think that your discussions were organized in groups so that, isn't that right? So you would have them interacting in a group of 10 or 15 students.
Right, it depended on how many students were in the class. This class did have a facilitator in it, so they were divided by groups of facilitators. Those of you who are not teaching online, once you hit a cap for the class and there's more students added, somebody else comes in to co-teach the class as a facilitator. So my facilitator took their own group and I took my own group, and they both did their own assignments, but she graded her group and I graded my group. So this is a picture of what we call an eco map in social work. It's lets the students check on a client's community supports. How connected are they? How many of those connections have been ruined purposefully? How many they just never developed? And so this was one piece of a longer term assignment. So we had a 5 assignment activity. So they started out early developing a life chart with somebody they knew that was as old as possible, is what I told them. So they had to start with an age range of what years were they from 0 to 7, and what years were they from 7 to 14. And so then they had to talk about the current events that impacted during that time. And then there was another column for the family for the client to list things that happened in their family, other births, changes of jobs, divorces, deaths. And then the students will look to see how those things impacted the developmental aspect of the client, how those impacted the eco map of the client, what the cultural influences were that benefited the client and maybe hurt the client because they didn't get attached to their culture, and then the key issues the client would have moving forward. So most people talk to their grandparents because those were the oldest people they knew, and they learned a lot of information about their family that they didn't know. And so they were also able to see how their generation benefited and hurt from the connections that this family had based upon what happened to them during their lifespan. And so that piece was a bonus that happened because most of them picked their grandparents. But for people that didn't pick their grandparents, they picked the guy next door, their landlord. They were still able to get a good sense on how life impacts your development, both your personal life and social development. And it was good to see that the clients connected it. But because they were smaller pieces, they weren't overburdened with it, and they were able to make edits as they went through and give me one longer paper during the last week. And so the purpose was just for them to understand the life cycle stages. So there's all kinds of theories to do life cycle stages for those of you who are not in a social work type class or discipline. So the students could look at Freud or Erickson or any of the other development people in this project and learn about those things impact and where people could be in their normal life stage. So, students can learn what's normal in terms of age development, and then recognize whether or not there was an issue. And we'll going forward in their internships and when they're working in social work, that will benefit them, because if they meet a 5-year-old who isn't potty trained yet, they know there's something wrong. Likewise, if they meet a 50-year-old who's already hard of hearing, they also know that that's something that's wrong, because they learned about those developmental stages here in this project.
How did you see the students grow in their professional knowledge and vocabulary through this project?
I saw them understand. So when they wrote their first developmental piece about the theorist, they didn't have a strong vocabulary, but then they learned the vocabulary about the eco map, and they learned what Freud and Erikson used as their stages, and they were able to come back and talk about things in the right social work language. Most of them had never heard of an eco map before, and most of them didn't know all the developmental stages. They kind of just knew one, or they knew Freud, but they didn't know necessarily Erikson's 8 stages, or Havikhurst's moral development. So they've learned all kinds of different things here that they could recognize were beneficial. I did learn something in this course. I used to let them use whatever theorists they wanted, and without exception, everybody in the first class I taught did Erikson, because it's clean, it's straightforward, it's easy. So the next time going forward, nobody was allowed to use Erikson. They had to use somebody else and figure out their stages, because I thought it was important for them to be able to think about them and come up with what they needed to know instead of laying out the land for Erikson.
The thing I think is really interesting about this is that it is this cumulative project. And I just wondered, by the time you got to the end, did you find that the quality of their work really demonstrated all that they've learned?
I think that came not only from this project, but also from so many discussion posts. So the discussion posts needed to have references in them. They got better at writing, because some of them had been out of school for a very long time. And so as things were happening, they were getting up to speed on their writing skills again, that they used to have, but they didn't really use a lot anymore. And so I think that it wasn't just this course, but I think it was getting back in the groove of being a student helped them as well. And these are some comments that Mary pulled out of our student evaluations. Stephanie could tell you that these were not the only evaluations that came my way. The students thought the class was very fast-paced, and it needed some organization that I didn't catch when I was designing them. And so that feedback that the students gave me also helped make the class stronger moving forward. But there were students that felt like I was available to them. And so even if there was something that they couldn't understand in the course, they always knew that I was going to answer their emails right away, and that it would be put up in an announcement for them to make it clearer. And I changed things as we went, so that moving forward, when Mary copied the course and used it for somebody else, the corrections were already made there. And I actually sent out the syllabus for this class to the students and said, what would you have liked to have seen differently? And they arranged things differently. They wanted the course content at the front and all the stuff that the university requires at the bottom. They didn't want to wade through all that to get to what they needed to do. So there were suggestions from the students that helped this course get a little bit more organized as well.
I think that these comments, though, clearly show that you connected with the students as a mentor, as well as their professor, that your background and your professional knowledge was something that they really benefited from, and providing all those videos and all of that content, which is a lot of work, really came through to helping students learn from you in the same way they would in a face-to-face classroom. Because that's one of the hard things that I sense, that sometimes it's hard to be where you cannot look the students in the eye. How do you know that they're learning?
Right. There's a magical number of contents. You can't overwhelm them with a lot of things in every module, but you can't just give them a PowerPoint and say, have at it, and expect that they're going to learn anything. So it's trying to get a balance between how much is too much and how much is not enough in a module when you're not seeing them face to face. So you can't see their eyes turning glassy when they see what they have to do. You can't see their looks of confusion or their questions about what's going on here. So you really have to not overwhelm them, but also not underwhelm them. It's a real balance, and it's hard to catch that all together.
So,
And just to look back at our model, go ahead, Mary.
oh, please go ahead.
So we think, Mary and I think that based upon what the review from the students, the content that we got, the grades from the students, that we had hit this educational experience middle that gave them content in the online environment.
Right, and I love this model for showing us just all of these dimensions and how they're always at play in learning, and we know that these change with every class, you know, just like you were mentioning, after one class, you noted some things you needed to change, but some of it is just dependent on who the students are and how that comes out into the social presence and the interactions. But I think the fact that Kelly worked so hard to follow the suggestions that we gave in terms of the template, in terms of following the requirements, providing mini lectures, I think all of those elements really helped contribute to the class, the overall educational experience. And we have a link to kind of an overview video, which I can paste in the chat if you like.
So we submitted this as part of the video of the class for part of the award. So it just kind of walked us through the award. Mary did this. I cannot take any credit for any of it, but it just kind of gave the people that were reviewing for the award an opportunity to see the different pieces of the class. And I didn't see any questions while we were talking, but I am happy to take questions or comments. And what I can't answer, Mary will answer. Feel free to jump in.
I have a question.
Shoot.
Fantastic job. I have to say, I have the students that you taught in this class in a different class now, and they're very comfortable talking about theories and applying them to explain what they would do in a case scenario. So good job.
Well, that's good to know. Great.
Yeah, thank you for your contribution. If you were going to stay with this course, which I have inherited, if you were going to stay with this course, what would be some next steps to help push the course forward in your mind? I mean, at least my own experience is usually when you first design something, it's not perfect. You learn as you deliver it. So help me know what next steps would be.
So I revised it after every time I taught it already. But I think that they could benefit more from maybe longer, I don't want to say longer, more direct information about each of the developmental theorists. So they didn't learn, I mean, like the theorists are all in one PowerPoint. And maybe they should be in their own separate PowerPoints, still in the same course, but not terribly long. They don't need to know about the positives and negatives of each one of them, but they need to know a little bit more detail than what was there. But I think all the kinks about the assignments were worked out, and I think the assignments can stand on their own still. I think they help the student get through some issues that were pretty good. You could videotape and take me right out of all those classes. You could just listen to me in your ear, and you could get rid of all those videotapes. That would be good too.
I think, you know, a lot of times we don't want to do videos, but I appreciate when instructors do videos because I do think it helps students make a connection to you and see you as their instructor.
I liked them. I thought they're great. I mean, what I really liked about them is you had the ones where you were seeing we were seeing you teach in front of a board, which is really cool. And then you had the slides and that were narrated. So that was another modality. But I really like that. And I was wondering, I mean, this is kind of sideways of how did you get those lectures recorded originally? Were they just, I mean, they're so good. They were so formal.
So one of my previous universities had what was called the one button or the one stop. And it was in the library. It was designed for students. And so you literally hit one button, the computer started, the camera turned on, the audio turned on, the speaker, the microphone turned on, and you hit that one button when you were done. And I went in with multiple changes of clothes, and I stayed in there for an entire day, and I videotaped them all on the same day. So I changed outfits when I thought, okay, I already wore this. I wore this scarf with this, and I changed. I was in the library. It was in the back corner. It was during the end of summer before classes started, so I wasn't worried about a lot of students walking through, and that's how I did it. I thought somebody told me that Eastern Kentucky was getting ready to buy that one stopper, one button thing.
I was just in the library last week and I saw it, but maybe Brad or Chris can speak more specifically to how it can be used.
I was going to say Brad's name. I've seen it just like you, Mary, but nothing else. Got a nice invitation to come see it. I don't know if Brad wants to talk about that, but yeah, it's there.
It's very easy. Makes you look like an expert.
I'm sorry. What could you repeat that again? I'm sorry. I was multitasking.
One button studio.
Okay. Anne asked me about the one button studio. She asked me how I recorded all my videos. And in my last university, they had a one button studio. I went in with multiple changes of clothes, and I videotaped all the lectures on one day by changing clothes and hitting the button. And she asked me why it looked so professional. I said, I thought that Eastern Kentucky was getting it.
Yeah, I'm not really involved with it, so I can't really speak with authority. Is it over in the Noel studio? Is that where you're
in Fictal?
In Fictal, yeah, okay, yeah. So yeah, I really can't speak with any authority on it though. So yeah, but I've heard the things that you all have heard, and it seems like it's a really cool, really new, cutting edge kind of way to modularize the process and make it much more efficient. So
super easy. And then Mary helped me put the captions in. So any video that's got captions, or it takes you to a screen where it says and this something, and she got a direct quote there, that was Mary. Does anybody else have any other questions?
You answered several of the questions I have, but I do have just some curiosities. Do you think that, we talk about adult learners a lot, and, we know that that's the majority of who we serve in online, at least for now. But do you think there are any particularities or characteristics that are within the realm of social work? Are there things that, like if you're somebody that were instructing social work majors or social work graduate students at other venues, that you'd want to keep in mind?
So because of our accreditation, we all have to teach the same material. So it's really about the way you teach the material than it is about the content, because we're all teaching the same content across the country. But it's good to think about delivering it in a fresh way that's going to be different for you and exciting for the students. So that's what even when I taught face-to-face, my goal was to have very little conversation from me and a whole lot of dialogue amongst the students, and discussion boards allow that. And the students have a lot of knowledge. The adult learners have been working, most of them have been working in the field for years. They just don't have the graduate degree. And in order to advance, they need to have the graduate degree so they can make more money and do more things. So that's why they show back up in school again, because they want the degree to do what they can do. So it's just important to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I have somewhat of a philosophical question related to the creation of a safe space for student discourse through these discussion forums. And I really like how you were saying that discussion forum area is for peer-to-peer encounters, that safe space, rather than going in there and intruding. And I felt like that too. It's like, I care, I want to be involved, but they don't always want me there. I want to respect their space to just talk. And so increasingly I've thought about being a little bit more discerning as to when I do get involved in their discussions during the week, that's really is like the student zone, other than just, kind of checking in, moderating, like you were saying, to make sure everything's on track. But another thing I've been thinking about too recently is the ungrading movement, and thinking about how the grading process, I mean, there is so much anxiety built up around grades and getting a certain grade and point reductions and rationale for that. And it just leads to a lot of difficulty and almost like an obsession with the wrong thing rather than the learning process. It's about the grade, the points, and then in a way, defensive grading, the use of a rubric to explain every move. And it just, again, it's just like we're losing the spirit of, in my mind, the spirit of education, which is the joy of learning, growing as a professional, testing out your ideas. So I just wonder, any thoughts on that regarding the use of grades in the discussion forum area? I've been a little bit paranoid about grading those, thinking about, well, would I sit in a classroom in person? When I taught this in person, I didn't walk around the classroom and critique every word they said in small group discussions. I mean, that seems contrary to what I wouldn't do that. But in a way, I'm doing that in an online environment. I'm critiquing what they say in their small group discussion. And so I have really mixed feelings about the rigorous level of grading those. So any thoughts on that?
So Hagen just posted that psychology faculty, some of them are using the ungrading. And so is anthropology and sociology, according to Stephanie. I kind of like the rubric. I kind of think the rubric being given to the students prior to the start of their work helps them have some serious guidelines about what we're looking for. And so it's no secret that what I'm going to do when I grade them. And so the rubrics I set up, though, are just, there's a possible of this many points. And this section of the paper gets this amount of points. And then I put their point in there. There's no large group chart that says, okay, if you get between 15 and 18 points, you get this. And I do very direct little ones. And when I graded discussions, it was more about you got involved in the discussion. I didn't grade the content of what the students said. If they said something completely wrong, I gave that feedback to them. But if they answered the question and they got involved within the peer, they got full credit. It was harder to get full credit on other assignments, but discussions was not that hard for me to give them full credit.
Thanks.
I tend to agree with Kelly. I think that one of the advantages, or when you look at those rubrics, any sort of evaluation process like that, the benefit of that is that you can ensure it's objective, but you can also ensure it's transparent. And being objective and transparent, in my opinion, are something that that ungrading movement is challenging or is struggling with, is how you maintain objectivity and transparency.
So Mary just wrote she sees that there's no ground rules for discussion boards in undergraduate classes, and they surface with, I agree with you. So our discussion posts have guidelines on them. They have to be so long, they have to be referenced. And so I think if those were given to, I don't know what a freshman or a sophomore would do with a length like that. But I think a junior or senior could certainly give a 150-word response to their peers that was referenced. I think the other way, though, is for freshman and sophomore, it would be a little bit harder, but I think that the questions from the faculty member would have to be clearer and more thoughtful. There's a teaching education book that is called A Beautiful Question, I believe. And it helps you form questions. I'm looking at my bookshelf, hang on. It's called a More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. The Power of Inquiry to Spark Breakthrough Ideas. So I read this book a long time ago, and I pulled it up when I was designing discussion questions. just to make sure I was a little bit on target with that. I don't remember if the book talks about specifically undergraduate classes, but it does help you think about how to pose questions to get thought. We don't have to wait for me to look at the table of contents. If somebody's got another question, that's fine. There's not anything specific to undergrads here. There can be hotbed questions in social work, sociology, anthropology, psychology, that can get people a little bit worried and heated, but you have to have those discussions to ask the hard questions that students need to figure out based upon their values and the values of the professions as well. Does anybody else have another question? I don't want to cut off having the conversation. I just want to, while we're close to the presentation, I want to say thank you for letting me give my ideas and my 2 cents out here. I appreciate coming back and being able to share that. But I'm also completely fine and plan on staying until the end to have dialogue about teaching. And I thank Mary for all she did for me for the courses she helped me design. They were fabulous.
And I would just like to say, I always loved working with Kelly because of her ideas, the experience she brought to the class. And, you know, many times we weren't able to do everything on the list, but we gave it our best shot. And I feel like, and that's part of the process too, sometimes deciding what you can do in the time you have and going forward with that. But Kelly's lecture is so rich and what she brought to the classroom. So I'm so glad she had a chance to share today and is doing this for us as a guest lecturer.
Really appreciate
you.
both of you.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I was just thanking you both. I really appreciate you both taking the time. It's very significant. I can preach these things all day long. Didn't have a tenth of the impact as when you say what works for you and can get, you know, ideas generated from your colleagues.
Yeah. And I'll reach out to you. Do you have practice 1 right now? Yeah, so there's something at the end that I need to tell you about where to go to find it. There's a visit of a house, and the students have to find what's wrong with it for a home visit. But it doesn't work unless you're in Mozilla. So I'll reach out to you and talk to you about that.
Thank you so much.
If I could just plug a few of our upcoming opportunities, please keep talking. Dr. Robert Cosma, who's one of the key debaters in the media debate and education, he's going to speak for us, and that's part of our OTL PD offering. So I'll see if I can paste these links in the chat. Now it doesn't come over, but I'll send that to you, all the participants today in another email. But hope you'll give some thought to attending that one. It's going to be a really good one about designing a better world, making the world a better place through the act of design, which we all, he argues, take part in. And I tend to agree. But he's a wonderful speaker and an internationally known person. So.
Thanks for your inspiration. Y'all are
Thank
awesome.
you. Thanks for coming, everybody.
I'll go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you all.